The Newsround on Off the Ball.
With Gillette, proud sponsors of Movember. Gentlemen, start your razors.
This is News Talk.
Hello folks, you're welcome along to Monday evening's Off the Ball. We're looking back on a weekend where St Pat's beat Bohs in front of 37,000 fans at the Aviva Stadium to win the FAI Cup. We'll be chatting about that this hour. Dan McDonald's going to join us in a short while. Pat Nevin, meanwhile, was at Stamford Bridge yesterday. Pat will be along for the football show after 9. And the rugby season in particular has been interrupted by COVID once again. Munster have been cleared in the main to fly home from South Africa from today. Meanwhile, Ulster victorious at the RDS for just the second time ever, first time in 8 years. Fiona Hayes and Darren Cave on the way after 8 o'clock. And Tommy Rooney will talk to us about the weekend's GAA action as well. 53106, the text number. We are at Off the Ball on Twitter. Richie McCormack, dare I ask how you are? Hello.
I'm all right. I was just talking to Dave before we came on air, and JP actually. And if it had been a stonking, if it had been 3-4-5-0 or something like that, then I'd be in a whole lot worse mood. But you can't get too upset over penalties, unfortunately. But yeah, taking it in with stride, Joseph.
They say it's a cruel way to end a game, Richie.
Apparently so. Yeah, apparently so. It just, I don't know, like it wasn't a great quality final, and it's a real disappointment that there was like the highest attendance for an Aviva final so far, and the game took so long to get going. Like, it was really extra time before you could say there was proper life in it. Pats were probably the better side over the course of 120 minutes. Bohs probably had the better chances, ironically enough, and probably could have won it, and probably should have won it, judging by the replays of Rory Feely's shot in extra time. But yeah, what can you say? It just played out that way. Like, and for all the clubs to have beaten Bohs to do it, like, if Pats have a lot of good people behind them, a lot of good people run the club. One of their coaches grew up 2 doors down from me, and yeah, congrats to them. Thoroughly deserved win, in so much as a 1-1 draw after 190 minutes can be thoroughly deserved.
Yeah. 37,126 spectators through the gates. Dave McIntyre, you were one of them.
I was. Thoroughly enjoyable afternoon. I'd echo pretty much everything Richie said there. I thought it was a poor game overall. As is often the case in cup finals, certainly felt that for the majority of the 90 minutes, both sets of players were very much afraid of making the mistake that might lead to the goal that would likely decide the game, because you felt from very early in the proceedings that it was going to be that sort of a game, a 1-goal game. And in the end, it took 120 minutes to deliver 2 goals, but it definitely caught fire in extra time. And I was there with my 7-year-old. Halfway through the second half, he was happy enough to leave. His temperatures were starting to drop, and I said, no, look, we'll get to extra time. And 5 minutes into the first period of extra time, he asked the question, maybe it's time we head on now. I'm starting to freeze over from the inside out. And they said, no, just give it another couple of minutes. And then it caught fire. A couple of brilliant goals. I thought the header was superb. The lead goal was brilliantly taken, and there were chances at both ends. Both goalkeepers pulled off several brilliant stops, and it finally got the feel of a cup final for half an hour at least.
Yeah.
And then obviously the penalty shootout is a bit of a lottery, but overall a thoroughly enjoyable day. Proper cup final feel to everything that happened in the Aviva Stadium yesterday, right from the half an hour before kick-off, the build-up, and the flares probably illegal. They shouldn't have been in there, but you can't argue that at times the flares really added to the big game feel as well. I'm sure the authorities will have looked closely at that, and they'll be hoping that maybe they can change that in cup finals going forward. But myself and my son thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a great day.
Yeah. No pyro, no party, Dave.
Yeah, we had ended at the game for us yesterday, as well as doing the game from Stamford Bridge, and the atmosphere far better it sounded at the Aviva Stadium. It was great to hear.
It seemed
a big atmosphere in the background. It was a lovely thing to hear for an Irish football event.
Big game atmosphere, and I don't know, Dave, you were I think in one of the upper stands. I was in the east stand. Yeah, I was in the east stand lower. It was just underneath you. It just seemed like there was more than 37,000 there. It didn't seem like there was vast, like a swathe of empty seats anywhere. It just felt like there was more. It felt like what a cup final should feel like. And like, thinking back, like I froze my hoop off in 2008 at the RDS behind one of the goals there, and there wasn't 10,000 at that. And you go through the ones that like Sporting Fingal won, and then on through the early struggles in the Aviva and managing to get a crowd. The job that was done by both clubs in particular to get 37,000. I think they sold 39,000 tickets. 1,000 odds didn't show. But to sell that amount of tickets for a cup final off the back of the work at the clubs is just remarkable stuff. And both clubs should be wholeheartedly commended for getting that done. And hopefully it sets the benchmark for cup finals going forward, because there's a lot of teams around the country who could bring similar support if the right work is done to an occasion like that.
Well, you didn't miss much at Stamford Bridge. Work called. I was mainly focusing on that game, and the first half was just really tough going. The whole game, in so much as Michael Carrick afterwards tried to talk it up, and even the pundits a little bit talked about progress and more organisation, it was actually just a statement of how far Manchester United have fallen. They went and often had 5, on occasion 6 players in their defensive line. This was drop back, defend, show virtually no ambition. 66% possession Chelsea, all the chances for Chelsea, 24 attempts to 3, and but for Jorginho losing the flight of a ball in the floodlights, United would just have had nothing to offer up here. And it was talked about as, God, that's not bad, that's not a disaster. They are back, Dave, to starting from square zero here. I mean, this was back to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer when he first got the job and was just trying to hit teams on the break, and now they're doing a lesser version of that, and there's optimism about it. Ralph Rangnick cannot come in soon enough.
Yeah, but it's very hard to point the finger of blame at anyone over the last week for that. I mean, I was commentating on the Watford game, and I mean, Watford could have had 8. So, I mean, they're not even at square one. What are the vantage points before square one? They had to go all the way back to that. And the first thing, and we spoke about it last Tuesday night on the show, that the new man in, whether it was Carrick for a few days or with Rangnick in a longer term situation, they should see it as a really great opportunity to make United better quickly, because they were so bad defensively. I described it as low-hanging fruit last week. The first thing they should be able to do is make themselves harder to beat. And even in a week under Carrick, they've made themselves more difficult to beat. They've drawn at Chelsea, the Champions League winners from last season. They've gone to Villarreal and beaten them and booked their place in the last 16 in the Champions League with a game to spare. In comparison to where they were at the full-time whistle at Vicarage Road, the players and the management involved yesterday probably feel that they're a world away from there. But you're right, they are starting from such a low point that it seems progress will be slow, and real progress is a long way away. But what were the alternatives given what had befallen them? In 2 of their last 3 away games, they conceded 4 times against 2 teams who were going pretty average this season. Watford, obviously relegation fodder. Leicester City have turned it around in the last week or so, but they were in a bad patch when they hammered United. I mean, what else was Michael Carrick to do?
Well, I don't know really. Although Roy Keane did ask the fair enough question, what's he been doing for the last 6 months? Why were they not harder to beat, for instance, against Watford or against Liverpool or against Man City? We'll talk about it with Pat Nevin a little bit later on the football show.
Keane seems to have that opinion that Manchester United should be winning games because they're Manchester United, or Manchester United should be competitive because they're Manchester United. There doesn't seem to be much appreciation of the reality of their situation now, which is that they're such a badly organised team and have been for a while, that the best bet is when you go to somewhere like Chelsea, who don't concede goals. That was their 5th goal they conceded all season, 13 games. To score against them is an achievement in and of itself, but they've been steamrolling teams. Yeah. So if you've been in the form Manchester United are in, it's well within your rights to go there and be conservative, because otherwise you're going to get stuffed.
Oh, they're well within their rights, but it just shows how badly the season has fallen apart, that this was their only option almost, and they were still battered. They just got away with it. To be fair to Keane, in that rather odd argument with Carragher, which was kind of going around in circles a little bit, Keane was arguing that Manchester United are just a cup team now. Win an FA Cup or win a League Cup, that's kind of what Manchester United are, and that's what Ronaldo was bought for, that they were nowhere near and are nowhere near winning the league. So, but it was hard to make that out. I think Carragher was just thinking to himself, Dave, I can't back down here, because this clip's going viral and it can't be Roy Keane shuts me up, so I'm going to keep screaming too.
Yeah, I may be in the minority of one, but the person who I couldn't take my eyes off was Jimmy Floyd-Hasselbaink.
100%. He's the star of that show. He is the star of that show completely.
Jimmy, as is so often the case for the guy in the middle of Keane, Souness, Keane, Mika Richards, Keane, Neville, Keane, Carragher, there's nowhere to go and there's nowhere to look. And the way he came in with some vanilla comment about, well, you have to find a way to get him in the team. And I just kind of thought to myself, Jimmy, you're probably better off not saying anything at all there, because I felt sorry for him again, being the guy who is so often the case, caught between Keane and another. I couldn't take my eyes off Jimmy Floyd-Hasselbaink. But Carragher's point was a good one. I could fully understand why Ronaldo didn't start yesterday. Absolutely. And 100%. Had that penalty not been given away, I mean, another low point in the season of low points for Aaron Wan-Bissaka. Had that not been given away and Ronaldo had come in with 20, 25 minutes to go and Chelsea were still behind and they're starting to commit even more bodies forward and maybe throwing more caution to the wind, and Ronaldo helps United hit Chelsea on the break and they win 2-0. Carrick will be depicted as being a master craftsman in what he had done yesterday. So I could fully understand why Ronaldo hadn't started, and he has started most games. He is 36 years of age, and there are going to be times where it probably is the better option not to start him.
We should start the news round because there's loads going on. It is, as ever, with thanks to Gillette, proud sponsors of Movember. Gentlemen, start your razors. And you've got the latest on Munster in South Africa, Richie.
Yeah, they're pressing on with preparations for their opening Heineken Champions Cup match. They remain in South Africa, as you mentioned, awaiting the results of a new round of PCR tests. One member of Munster's travelling party is isolating in a separate hotel, having tested positive for COVID-19. Earlier today on News Talk, Minister of State for Sport Jack Chambers said that all but 2 of the Munster group are to be allowed home. The squad will have to isolate for 10 days upon their return, with a trip to Wasps due on December 12th. Munster say Academy manager Ian Costello is working with Academy players and indeed a select number of returning internationals for that game at the Rico.
Yeah, within the context of rugby and rugby not being all that important in the wider scheme of things in this pandemic, it's disastrous for the tournament. The URC have cancelled the weekend games in South Africa just gone and next weekend as well. The way all this was working over the weekend, I mean, it was frantic really for the various URC teams from the Northern Hemisphere to try and get home, and Munster and Scarlets shared a flight to get to Cape Town. Cardiff and Zebre had convened there as well. The plan was to charter a flight home, and then the PCR testing showed that there were 2 positive cases in the Cardiff camp, one of them being the new variant, and then with Munster, 1 positive case and 1 close contact. So both of those 2 travelling members of the 34-person party are going to stay behind, which sounds like no fun. We wish them well. And so 32 will get home.
The UK weren't allowing flights in. They were essentially having to wait for the okay from the Civil Aviation Authority before they could even get into the country.
Yeah.
So you could have had a situation whereby they'd passed their latest round of tests, but we're still waiting 2 or 3 days maybe to get back in, and they get being delayed and going cyclical ever further and just being essentially stranded down there, twiddling their thumbs with games about to roll around the corner and start next month.
Very messy. And Scarlets are up in Belfast at the moment. They flew into Dublin on this charter flight. But I suppose the immediate point, what it means for the URC and trying to fit in these games in South Africa, or maybe moving the games to somewhere like Italy, which had been talked about, or maybe if it quickly turns out this variant is everywhere, that in 2 or 3 weeks' time they'll relax the travel restrictions. It seems there's a period of discovery at the moment with the new variant. But regardless, if you just look at the European fixtures, Dave, Munster due to play Wasps in Coventry on Sunday, December the 12th. Now, if they were to arrive home tomorrow, and tomorrow might even be a bit ambitious, but if they were to arrive home tomorrow, they would be released from quarantine on Friday the 10th. And presumably on Friday or Saturday morning they'd have to fly to Coventry for this game on the 12th. I don't know if that's a fair ask.
Well, it's clearly not. It's a horrendous situation. I mean, there's so much of the human element involved. Those 2 members of the touring party that are being left behind, you just feel so sorry for those guys and for their families. And you feel sorry for the organisers of the URC, who have had to endure so much over the last few years. And we had that rather, difficult to stomach Rainbow Cup at the back end of last season that nobody really was able to get into, and the South African teams playing South African teams and the same Celtic League sides playing each other all over again. And we really thought this was a bright new dawn, the start of this season's URC, and for my money it had started really well, the new season, and it was generating a lot of interest. And just as we were about to see the mettle of the South African teams on home soil, having other sides visit them for a change, this drops upon them and it's like a bomb, and you feel sorry for everybody involved. How Munster are going to get prepped for this Wasps game, I just do not know. It's the biggest game of their season right now. Even if they weren't able to get a bit of training in, which at the moment you don't see how that will be the case, I think they'll have gone 7 weeks without a match. I mean, heading to what is one of the most difficult groups or games in your conference in the Heineken Champions Cup, it's all turning into the perfect storm. Bit of a nightmare for everyone, but it's going to be very difficult to see how Munster come out of this, A, with their season unscathed, but B, you just want everybody to get home safely and back to where they belong.
Manchester United confirmed Rangnick this morning, Rich.
They certainly did, yeah. He's their new interim manager. The German will guide United through the last 6 months of their season, having left his role as Lokomotiv Moscow's head of sports and development. Rangnick says his job now is to help the United players fulfil their potential. He'll move on to a consultancy role in the summer once a permanent manager is found, but Michael Carrick is likely to be in charge of Thursday's Premier League meeting with Arsenal as Rangnick awaits his work visa.
The reporting yesterday, Jonathan Northcroft, for instance, had it that Rangnick blew Ed Woodward and co away in the Tuesday Zoom interview. By far the outstanding candidate for Valverde and all the rest couldn't compete with the things Ralph Rangnick was saying, and that swung their judgment. I suppose what surprised everyone at Touch Day, the 6 months everyone knows about. And look, I suspect Rangnick is coming thinking, if I do a good job for the 6 months, I'm going to stay on as manager. But regardless, the 2-year consultancy contract is also interesting. I mean, nice work if you can get it. There's a vagueness to that, isn't there? I mean, consultancy might be, well, I'll take a phone call once a month from my home in Germany, or consultancy could be, well, I'll be around the club on a fairly daily basis. They've got Darren Fletcher as technical director, John Murtagh as football director. If I was either of those, I'd be asking, what exactly is this Ralph lad doing from September 2022?
Yeah, well, the Darren Fletcher appointment as technical director is a peculiar one anyway, because he's got absolutely no experience, and it's the sort of appointment that Manchester United have been routinely making over the last 7 or 8 years. So I would fear for Darren Fletcher if I was Darren Fletcher, because I don't see how he has a long-term future in such a high-profile role if they get these 2 appointments right. On the face of it, they've got this one right. It seems to be the first bit of long-term thinking that they have done in quite some time. That they're not maybe quite taking so much of a gamble on what they're going to do over the next 3 to 4 months in the very short term. If it's a case that he feels a good job over the next 6 months, a brilliant job, would open the door for him to get the manager's job on a permanent basis. If I was a United supporter, that would worry me, because that would indicate that they are not doing anything in the meantime to appoint their next long-term manager. And that if they're waiting until the summer and to see how the next 6 months go under Rangnick, well, then that's a problem. If Pochettino is their man, you would think that Manchester United hierarchy are working on that day in, day out as we speak, trying to clear the way for PSG to be happy for Pochettino to walk in the summer. Perhaps he'll be sacked by PSG. You don't know what will happen between now and then. But overall, it looks like a good appointment with a long-term future in play as some sort of sporting director. You call it a consultant. We'll see how that pans out. And in the background, they're actively working completely separate to Rangnick on the new man in charge. That's what my United fans would be hoping for. Whether that's actually happening, who knows? Yeah,
maybe. I mean, maybe it's true. It's a shot to nothing win-win scenario. He does great, give him the contract, and he stays on as manager. He doesn't do great. There's no great scandal. There's no great sense of, they've lost another manager, because this was always the plan. Anyway, Richie, there's lots of texts coming in on the crowd trouble yesterday. I know you're turning to the match yesterday, and you've a statement from Bohs on that, but some reaction from the Pats captain, first of all.
Yeah, Pats claimed their 4th FAI Cup yesterday and their first in 7 years. Stephen O'Donnell's side beat Bohemians 4-3 on penalties after the sides played out a 1-1 draw after extra time at the Aviva Stadium. Pats captain Ian Birmingham was asked how yesterday's win stacks up next to that of 2014.
It's probably the best feeling I've had in football, to be quite honest with you. Just in terms of like the way, obviously winning the league and the cup a good few years ago now was obviously brilliant, but you might think sometimes that it happens every year then, but to go on the sort of decline that we did, but we went on a little bit of a slip over the last number of years, and just to come back here to captain this team, I said it to the lads before the game, it's an absolute honour to lead them out into the Aviva for this club in a cup final. It was probably the proudest day of my football career to do that, and obviously to come out on the winning side and to lift the trophy with a great friend of mine, Christy O'Neill, who's been here longer than me. It's just special. And to add to that, I had my first child on Friday, which it's probably all my dreams came true in a weekend. So I can't believe it, to be quite honest with you. It's the best weekend of my life, to be honest.
I mean, bloody right it is. Ian Birmingham, congratulations. Pippa, by the way, Dave, little girl, on Friday morning, and now lifts the trophy with the physio he mentioned there, who's been at the club for ages. So an amazing weekend for him.
Class, isn't it?
Yeah,
absolutely
beautiful.
class. To be a new dad and then a cup winner in the space of 36 or 48 hours is amazing.
Nuts. Yeah, it's mental.
And then, so Bohemian statement, Richie, I think you were onto them looking for the statement.
Yeah. I contacted them this evening. They're rightly enough upset and pretty angry. It's fair to say this one. They say a tiny minority were behind the violent incident in Irishtown yesterday, where a number of St. Pat's fans were attacked by around 24 individuals. Bohs have condemned the incident, saying any individuals identified in the footage will be banned from the club, and it is nothing that they would tolerate or encourage, of course.
Yeah, so lots of texts in. As someone who lives near the ground, if there's another cup final in Lansdowne Road, it'll be too soon, says Kieran. And somebody else says, hope you mention the issues before the game. Sea of glass and bottles in Irishtown on the way to crash this morning, says a texter. We'll just be cautious-ish in our comments, because there may well be criminal proceedings if the Gardaí are looking to identify those involved. I mean, Dave, it's... On the one hand, see, I think I've seen in the last 24 hours or so, League of Ireland fans on Twitter very upset if this is mentioned. You know, they had, a typical media making a big deal about this and how dare you, and you're just, besmirching the league, and it's a tiny minority. And yes, it is a tiny minority, but it has to be mentioned, because if this happened before any sporting occasion, we would talk about it, because the scenes are incredibly unsavoury. And then equally, I mean, I didn't want to lead with it either, because it is a small minority, and the 40,000 odd at the stadium, and most of us looking on just find the pictures embarrassing. Like, you'd be just embarrassed for them.
I am. Like, I say that as a supporter of one of the clubs, like completely mortified by it. And to the textures point in around the stadium, like, clearly I didn't do laps of the place, but like in the stadium itself, definitely I didn't encounter anything but even close to trouble or aggro in and around the stadium, coming in and leaving. And I was there with a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old, like nothing. Like, so the Irishtown thing seems like a complete outlier, and a horrible one at that. And like the point I think where League of Ireland fans get a little bit testy about it is that this is the thing that will be covered, and like the match would almost fall into the halfpenny place, and they see incidents like this getting more coverage than any rank or file game would. And there's umpteen reasons for that. We can take longer to go into it, but like that's where the anger is that this is the prism through which people who don't see the league through the other 30 odd weeks of the year, whatever it is, this is how they view it. And it's a wrong view. It's a view, and it's something that happened, and it's something that nobody has happened or should be reveling in at all, and should be disgusted and outraged by it. But it shouldn't dominate either.
Maybe shouldn't dominate. Although I think it deserves serious enough coverage, because it is a serious incident, and it is, does the Minister for Sports on the station talking about it, like, it is a very significant incident in conjunction with a football match. Now, I don't know, Dave, if these are even fans who even went to the bloody game. Are they just, they're just piggybacking on the event and looking for trouble and going for it? Or maybe they are fans and they think this is the way to behave. Like, what's so embarrassing about it is they support an Irish team and they probably think less of people who support an English team, and yet they're cultivating the most obnoxious, embarrassing elements of English supporters, i.e. hooliganism. Like, that's almost the most embarrassing aspect of the whole thing.
Yeah, there is. I mean, that's a really good point. And I mean, by extension of that, if you've got someone like myself that would be working pretty much every Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and I don't get too many opportunities to bring my son to a game, would I look upon an incident such as that and decide that I want to bring him to Dalymount Park, or to, for example, a Bohemians Shamrock Rovers derby on a Friday night at Dalymount Park? Absolutely not. I wouldn't even consider bringing my 7-year-old to Dalymount for a derby game such as that, in the knowledge that there have been incidents such as the one we saw yesterday in the past, pretty routinely when it comes to certain fixtures, and it happened again yesterday. So that'd be one point I'd make. But again, it is a tiny minority. It's a handful of thugs that have got themselves involved in something that I would imagine, and for their part, was preordained. And it's very tarnished. I'm not saying anybody is doing it, but very wrong to tarnish the League of Ireland or Bohemians Football Club as a whole with the brush that will be used to tar those guys yesterday.
Yeah.
Now, all Bohemians can do is make the sort of statement they've made today, go to every length possible in conjunction with the Gardaí to identify those involved and ensure the right steps are taken to prevent those guys from ever entering Dalymount Park again. or any League of Ireland ground ever again. But you made the point, perhaps they don't go to games. I mean, they were just a group that had trouble in mind and didn't have tickets for the game and just went out for what they saw would be a bit of fun. We don't have any knowledge of the facts, really, apart from that at the moment.
No. Okay, well, we'll see where it goes. Leinster then, they have issued injury update. I suppose the James Ryan news caught the eye, Rich.
Yeah, it did. He's going to see an independent concussion consultant, they say, as part of his recovery from a head injury. The Lock took a blow to the head in Ireland's recent win over Argentina. He missed, of course, last week's game with Ulster and has completed the return to play protocols, but he requires further monitoring in line with World Rugby regulations. Jamison Gibson Park is going to have a thigh injury assessed before Friday's game at Connacht, while Dan Levy is also following return to play protocols after Saturday's defeat to Ulster. Leinster lost 2010, Ulster's first win in Dublin for 8 years. And on this morning's OTB AM, Alan Quinlan was asked if it was down to complacency.
It's possible, Nathan, and it can happen. Everybody can kind of have one of those off days. As I said, you don't really see it that much from Leinster. They've scored the most, conceded the least in the league up to this point. They've been very, bar that Dragons match, as you said, where it was a poor performance. And maybe it's a mental thing. And he did say that. I thought it was really interesting that maybe some of the players believed the hype. Very, very strong Leinster side. I was surprised with the likes of Tyke Furlong starting the game. But look, there's obviously a plan for this next block, and they manage the players like that. And I'm sure Furlong wanted to start, and they probably needed him to start because Alatoa was away with Samoa. But yeah, mentally, it looked like they left it too late to react. But then they had periods in the game where they looked like they'd score, and they looked like the inevitable would happen. But credit to Ulster, Timoney, Alan O'Connor, these guys, they just put in so many tackles. James Humes was brilliant in the centre. And like I said, it can be bad mentally, and mentally we're talking about Leinster maybe switching off a little bit here, and sometimes you can change that out on the field over the 80 minutes. But when you lose the match, you can look back at maybe things that happen in training and maybe just being a little bit relaxed going into the game, even if it's only a couple of %. But the real key here is Ulster for them. Can they build on this and get consistency and have that kind of steely edge about them?
Alan Quinlan there. As Richie was saying on the James Ryan scene, the independent concussion consultant, that is mandatory. That's just triggered as part of the return to play protocols. I know it sounds incredibly dramatic. It's not that things aren't progressing on his part. I've no idea how things are progressing, but he would be seeing the independent concussion consultant either way.
Well, you don't pass the return to play protocols, the initial ones, and unless you're Grant, so that's a positive,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Alan Quinlan referenced Leo Cullen's comments after the game, Dave. I mean, he says these things in a very calm, even-tempered way, and yet the words themselves, when you see them written down, I suspect it's going to be a tetchy week at training. So he was talking about mixing the team up and how it's great for competition, but you risk losing cohesion. But he said, when a group doesn't deliver like this, then in many ways, sometimes that's their chance gone. And that's the harsh reality that some guys need to face for sure. And then at another point, he said, it's a kick in the backside. There's a lot of hype about this team. We need to make sure we don't listen to any of that. So I think that gives you a glimpse of how Leinster might react to this. They were, by the way, without Andrew Porter, Cian Healy, Ronan Keller, James Ryan, Ryan Baird, Jack Conan, Josh van der Fleer, Caelan Doris, Jamison Gibson Park, Johnny Sexton, Gary Ringrose, James Lowe, Hugo Keenan.
Yeah, look, there's 3 quick points I'd make on this. Firstly, I'm surprised these sort of performances don't present themselves more often with Leinster, because they are so used to winning games, and it is human nature just to maybe let your standards slip here and there. But they rarely throw in a display like this, which I think is a credit to them. Secondly, there'll be a part of Leo Cullen that I would suspect is quietly pleased by what happened, because it's the right time of the season to throw in a performance like this. It's a useful weapon that he's got in his armory now when it comes to whipping these lads into shape for huge European games coming up, in the knowledge that those names you've just listed are about to come back into the training paddock. So I'd say, while he wouldn't enjoy the defeat, certainly would enjoy watching a team he set up go out and play like that. there's part of them just thinking, right, we can use this to our advantage big time over the next few weeks. And thirdly, it's a huge result for Ulster, and it's all talk about Leinster, but you can't take away from how well Ulster played, how clinical they were. They took their chances. Winning it in Dublin against Leinster is something they have not done very often. Did you say it was the second time in their history?
Yeah.
First time in 8 years. And it's a huge fill-up for them. So Leinster will get over this quickly, but I think Ulster will take an awful lot from it, and this sort of result of performance may really stand to them in the weeks and months ahead.
Darren Cave's with us after 8 o'clock to chat some Ulster. Fiona Hayes as well. Fellas, we're out of time. Thanks a mil, Richie. Thank you. Dave McIntyre, thank you.
Your chance to win big. News Talk's cash machine.
Now, there was €5,291.16 in the cash machine this afternoon, but we had no winner. Person we picked at random from those who entered the competition today didn't answer when we called just after 3 o'clock. So the €5,291.16 rolls over to tomorrow, and we're going to add to it as well. So tune in to News Talk Breakfast 8 a.m. tomorrow morning, and we'll tell you exactly how much is up for grabs.
The Newsround on Off the Ball.
With Gillette. Proud sponsors of Movember. Gentlemen, start your razors.
Everyone is talking about the Opinions Matter podcast with Adrian Kennedy and Jeremy Dixon. It's one of the biggest podcasts in Ireland, but don't take our word for it. Here's what the listeners have to say.
It's off the chart. Anything can go. Good, bad or indifferent.
At least you can force on this podcast.
Yes, it's these two Muppets do me head in, but you gotta love the show.
I love the way they fight and they bicker like a couple that's been married for